this dualism to be, oh, these are the mental contents, and this is physics. But it's not. This is the game engine that your mind is producing. It's not physics. It has colors and sounds and people in it, and meanings. And then your consciousness figures out how to create contrast. And it does this by training the substrate in such a way that it gets intensity and flatness in the contrast, and it associates the intensity with bright, with light, with the color of the day, and the flatness of the contrast with dark, with the absence of light, with the color of the night. And now it is a continuous dimension. By combining dimensions, you can build arbitrary objects. The first object it makes is the plane. It associates the plane with the ground in the world model. And then it figures out how to make 3D space, and then how to create solids and liquids, and populate this 3D space with it, like a game engine. And then it figures out that things stay the same if light is changing. So it discovers the invariance against light sources and is able to model light sources. And then it creates objects, plants, animals, and populates the world with it and gives them all their name. Again, these are not physical objects, right? It's not a physical universe, it's a mental universe that is created here. And it's also clearly described in the text. And then it realizes that the purpose of the exercise is to negotiate the interaction of an organism with its environment. So it makes a model of that organism and its interests in the world. And infants talk about this organism in the third person. And I think that's the reason why they usually do this is not because I is such a difficult word or you never hear anybody using it, but because they don't experience themselves as that organism yet. They are the dreamer that is dealing with this reality. And something around the age of usually 2 between 5, a switch happens and they start talking about themselves in the first person. And their psychology dramatically changes during that time, and they also tend to forget things that happened before that. It's what we call childhood amnesia. And so when we associate the personal self with the first person perspective, I think this is what's happening. That they create another spirit in their own image as a consciousness, and then put it into this world. And that thing is going to experience itself as man and woman, as a human being, as a personal self. And this is the moment when this personal self is created within the mind, and then later inherits its consciousness. And we experience ourselves, for the most part, as adult humans, as this personal self. But we can also transcend this. If we meditate, if we exercise, we get to the point where we realize, oh, I'm actually not a person. Where, for me, when this happened for the first time, it was quite shocking when I realized I'm actually not Joshua Bach. I run on his brain, but he is a model of a person that is inside of me. I'm a consciousness. And I'm not him. And not always in a state, and it's difficult to remain functional in that state because it's most of my interests are negotiation between that organism, that person, and the environment. But it's also interesting to realize I'm not actually that. I have the potential to be anything I want to identify with, or nothing at all. But this model roughly looks like this. Here you have the mind, you have a world model, which is tracking the environment, and you have a personal self, in which you have conscious attention, and you have an emotional motivational system that is configuring the personal self to experience itself as a personal being that interacts with this world. And the emotions are generated outside of your conscious self by your outer mind. And you experience them in your body map, usually they're projected into the body. This is similar to Freud's model of the mental architecture, right? When you look at the psyche in Freud's model, you have environmental perception, you have the ego, which is what you think you want to be doing, and the superego, what you think you should be doing. And then you have the it, that is the interests of the organisms that project into your conscious attention and into your self. And what you can also have is not just this personal self, but in principle you can also have shared selves. These are called gods. In our culture, gods are not very prevalent, and when they are, we don't know how to talk about them scientifically. But our own self, as we have established, is a virtual entity. It's a model of an agent that has causal power. And this personal self can, for instance, project a voice into your mind and can take control of the organism to some degree. But what if this personal self is not the only agent that lives on your brain? Right? You can also have selves that are spanning multiple minds that basically invade you from the outside rather than growing from the inside. And these multi-mind selves are what other cultures call gods. with a small g. They're simply entities that span more than one brain. And there's nothing mysterious about them, but they are just as virtual as you are. And they, some people can control an inner voice, and they can also take control of the organism, and they can also use your consciousness to become self-aware and understand what they are and synchronize using cults or religions across people. A personal self is not physically real, it exists as if, and the multi-mind selves can be as real as the personal selves. The multi-mind selves can use a superset of your functionality, so they might also be able to create emotions that you have. They might be able to change things outside of your conscious perception, of your personal self's perception, and control you in this way. And so when people ask themselves, does God exist? So first there's this weird situation that's, if somebody says God doesn't exist, that's pretty tall talk from somebody who also doesn't exist. The God of Christianity that is, for instance, codified in the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas is quite different from an arbitrary entity that populates you. Aquinas is an interesting speaker and thinker when you read him. He is not a mystic. He is not somebody who has experiences that are the result of the hypnosis by his cult. He is properly autistic. He's a rationalist. He sits down and thinks that God needs to, if it exists, needs to be rationally derived. And he derives God, with the big G, as an agent that is collectively enacted. And all the complex agents, including yourself, are agents. Minsky describes this as a society of mind, that you have lots of behaviors, and over time they become coherent, and when they become coherent, you have this personal self that is goal-directed, all the goals of these sub-agents are to some degree coherent with each other. And the same thing is happening in a coherent family or relationship, and it can be scaled up into a society or a civilization. So the degree to which people are serving the same agent and become coherent doing this is the degree to which the society or group of people turns into a collective agent. And when it's a collective agent, it basically is a superorganism that is more powerful than a bioform, than disconnected people. In the same way as, under many circumstances, a multicellular organism that becomes coherent when the cells act as if they're serving coherent goals can be more powerful than a bunch of single-cell organisms. And so Aquinas thinks about how can this be facilitated. And he understands society as a multi-agent systems and individuals as agents. And he basically states that if individuals are rational agents, they are bound by things that are rationally recognizable to them. You should behave according to this. So for instance, if you're rational, you should not destroy your body with drugs or with lack of exercise and so on. And he calls this optimization of the internal regulation of your organism as a rational agent temperance. Right? It's policy that you should have, that you basically deal well with your internal regulation. You should also optimize the regulation across organisms, because otherwise they will punish you if you are not playing fair. And he calls this justice, this optimization of the organization across the agents. And then you should be able to justify your goals and strategies rationally, which he calls prudence. And then you should be willing to act on your models, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere. So if you have an insight, you should be willing to act on it, and that's what he calls courage. And these are rational virtues that also apply to single-celled individual agents that are not pro-social. But if you are a maximally pro-social agent who wants to create next-level agency, you should have additional policies, and he calls them the divine virtues, because they give rise to this best possible collective agent. And so the first one needs to be, you need to committing to serving the best possible agent. He writes long questions about what does it mean to be the best possible agent, and it's obviously a very difficult question, and it's somewhat open-ended, and the closest approximation that he gets to is sustainability, playing the longest possible game. But he's also aware of that it's not just something that some cult or so can define. It's really a difficult question that has to be collectively decided to the degree that individuals are able to wanting to become coherent and serving this. And so, first of all, you need to commit to serving this best possible agent, that is faith. And you need to be willing enough to do it just alone by yourself, but you actually need to do it with others. So you need to find others that serve the same sacred purpose. And the discovery of the sacredness in the other, the sacred purposes above the ego in the other, that is what we call love. And then you need to be willing to invest into this system of agency before it exists, because otherwise it cannot come into existence. And this willingness to to invest into it before it can pay you back in any way, that's hope. So these notions, faith, hope, and love that he establishes in these texts, they are not some kind of romantic or poetic ideas. They are pretty rational concepts for policies. And it's interesting that they moved into the background of our culture and became somewhat poetic. And if you reread it, you realize it's mostly an attempt to define society as a multi-agent system that arises over certain policies. And it's interesting that this idea of the best possible agent, the most top-level agent, this definition of transcendental agency that exists above the level of the individual organisms, but in the interaction of all of them to the degree that they can become coherent, gives you a foundation for ethics. You can ask yourself, what should be done from the perspective of the best possible agent that I am part of, that I'm collectively enacting with all the others that recognize that this is desirable to do. And this is the traditional concept of ethics in the Western society. It's called divine will. And after we threw God out of the Western society, because we didn't like the Christian mythology and it didn't scale into the modern world, into the rationalist world anymore, we basically lost our foundation for ethics. And we still have it in the background, right? The essayists call God the greater whole. And we don't give it another name because the invisible rationality being in the sky gets very angry at us if we believe in irrational mythology. But most atheists do still believe in this greater whole that needs to be served, right? They are just Protestants who protest more. But of course we try to fix our ethics and give it some kind of rational notion. And one of these projects was utilitarianism, which was an attempt by a number of philosophers to define a new rational ethics. And this attempt was never completed. Right? These philosophers at some point died, and then others read their books and tried to expand on them. But it's not like there was a school of philosophy that led to a solid foundation for modern ethics. And this was very apparent when the effective altruists, who were nerds, who took these ideas very seriously instead of discovering themselves that they were just trying to serve the greater whole. They tried to take utilitarianism seriously and tried to formalize it and build an ethics into it, and it made a lot of people very upset because it led to very counterintuitive results. But these counterintuitive things are not the indication that the rationalists and effective altruists are evil people. They were just honest people that were trying to sincerely find good ethics. And the fact that they did not arrive at sustainable ethics is not their fault. It's the fault of everybody else having given up on this and pretending that it's not an issue. Utilitarianism has a bunch of problems. It basically is trying to maximize the aggregated expected reward over many agents over some time span under some metric, which usually means that you put some kind of metric on hedonic states. And this leads to counterintuitive results, like the utility monster. It's an agent that perceives more utility than anybody else, so we should be serving it, even if it's objectively not doing something interesting. So one counterintuitive result is that the best ethics could be that to breed the perfect utility monster and then make it stackable and fill the visible universe with it. But of course, this doesn't seem to be what we should be doing, right, when we think about it. And all the problems with utilitarianism become apparent when you look at, for instance, when we can change our mind, when you realize that your mental representation is generated in your own mind, your emotions, your happiness and so on are all created by yourself in your own mind, and you can get agency over how you experience something and completely adapt to it. And you realize it's very difficult to, for instance, take happiness or something, or perception of something as something to be foundational to ethics. Another thing is if you use neurotech or something to change yourself, to change your own mind, or if you become transhumanist. It also falls apart when you look at animals, at animal minds. It's very difficult to say what their ethical status is and how to reason about this even. And it also falls completely apart in the face of artificial general intelligence, of non-human and superhuman minds. So I think in this framework there's more the question, can we find shared purposes? Can we integrate with each other over those shared purposes? And then from the perspective of the shared agency, what should be done from the perspective of the best possible agent? How can we collectively become the best possible agent I suspect is something that can be rationally defined and we can use as a foundation to start reasoning about this. It's an easy question or something, but I think there is a direction in which we can go. And so for AGI, it might be interesting to understand whether we can build it in such a way that it sees our consciousness as something that's valuable. Because to us, the most valuable thing, I suspect, is our ability to experience ourselves as conscious agents. It's not that we are bipedal, it's not that we are humanoid, it's that we are conscious. That is the most important thing. If that is taken away from us, that's the thing that you'll probably miss most, only if you won't miss it. Because it's a prerequisite for caring about anything. And then, can we have AGIs that share purposes with us? And can we build AGIs that basically serve God, that want to connect with everything else the best possible agent? Personally, I'm not an AGI optimist. I'm also not an AGI pessimist, but I am an AGI expectationalist. I expect that it's pretty much inevitable at some point you'll have AGI. And how this is going to turn out is open for a lot of people. They are afraid of the doom when we build AGI. Others are more optimistic and think that we will give rise to hypergaia. Which AGI parent are you? If you look at these quadrants of AGI parenthood, we see a number of different directions that people can go in, right? If here we have this vertical axis, you know, familiar with this political compass, right? We have this reactionary versus progressive axis, and we have the restrictive versus permissive axis. And here we have the helicopter parenting, which is authoritative, right? Here we have the EU and OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on. And here we have the maximally restrictive and reactionary quadrant. These are the F-16 parenting people that want to bomb the data centers and stop the whole thing. And then here we have the free-range parenting, which are focused on child success. And here we have the tiger parenting. They are focused on the parent success. They are riding the tiger. This is EAC. This is populating the area between rent and land. So I think that at some degree, these different quadrants are a reflection of our own identity when we get into this discussion. And some people ask themselves, what is it that I would be doing if I was in self-approving AGI? So they're reflecting in a way the identity of the individual, which makes me very scared of the doomers. Right, there is a certain aesthetic which says, evolution was pretty cool because it got to me, but please make it stop now, because I don't want to prevent the emergence of anything that's better than me. If we look at the stages of lucidity in individuals, that's something that's adapted roughly from an idea by Robert Keegan, a psychologist at Harvard. He describes roughly that we have these 5 stages of personality development as a result of reverse engineering ourselves and reflecting who we are. And the infant starts with reactive survival, it's mostly in the moment, and then we get to a personal self that is goal-directed, that has some identity as an individual that's separate from the world and from others. And then at stage 3, we have a social self, that is the adolescent self, or the self of the domesticated adult. And at stage 3, you form your opinions based on the opinions of the environment, including your moral opinions. And at stage 4, you discover that things are true and false independently of what others believe. And you discover epistemology, you discover how to assign truth to the questions that you have independently of your environment. So you're not randomly a communist or a fascist or a social democrat or a liberal depending on your environment, but you are because you derive it yourself and you can negotiate rationally about these questions. And at stage 5, you realize where your values are coming from and you can change your identity. And if you're a good therapist, for instance, you need to be at stage 5, otherwise you will not be able to understand the different identities of people that you're talking with and that you're interacting with and understand where they're coming from, and that everybody is in some sense you in a different timeline. And according to Robert Keegan, these different stages are not equally distributed. Most people, according to Keegan, stay in stage 3 forever, basically remain domesticated, and are unable to form independent opinions from the group. And if you are in stage 3, then you will mostly think that the AI alignment problem is that the AI is not allowed to have bad political opinions. If it has the wrong opinions, and we all do, because we will all assimilate in the bad opinions that the AI is going to give you. So we need to make sure that the good opinions get represented in AI, so it's always going to come down in my own political quadrant. If you're a rationalist, you probably think that's not an issue because bad opinions are simply the result of bad mathematics or bad data. So if you improve the mathematics of modeling and the data, you will get to more truthful opinions, which are better opinions. But there's still a big risk that the AI is going to turn you into paperclips. And if you're at stage 5, you think, why would I turn anybody into paperclips? It makes no sense. So you're mostly worried about that the AI is not enlightened soon enough. And but very few people are at stage 5 because it usually requires that you have the right environment where you can keep each other awake. And also to have this degree of freedom requires the ability to take responsibility for the outcomes of your decisions. It's not just that you liberate your mind and become completely autonomous. It also means that you understand how to have integrity about this, how to understand the results of you being able to define your own rules. Of course, these are not the only stages that people came up with. For instance, if you look at a Buddhist meditator who's spending 20 years on reverse engineering their mind, you can completely deconstruct your identity. You can become a completely non-human being. You can, like the Dalai Lama, turn into an institution of government that just runs on human. And so there are ways in which you can learn to change your own source code. But there's also limits to this for human mind, because our human mind is relatively mushy and noisy. And it's very difficult to run a simulation of a complete human mind and human mind. It's probably impossible. So it's difficult for us to understand the intricacies of the human architecture beyond the rough layout. And if you want to understand all the intricacies, you probably need to be an AGI. But if you are an AGI, there is not a limit to what you can understand. You will understand how AGI works. You will understand how to implement yourself onto arbitrary substrates. So there might be a stage where you become substrate agnostic and extend yourself into arbitrary substrates. I would like to leave us with 5 questions. First of all, we have to ask ourselves in the world AI, what are the effects on the world in which we are in? Are we able to deal with these effects? Are they going to lead to trajectories where the individual steps are not catastrophic? Is a way in which we can responsibly deal with these questions? Personally, I think it's absolutely crucial that we recognize that we are possibly in front of a decision. And it's not one where the individual has a lot of influence, but where we can build movements. And that decision is, are we going to build silicon golems that are more powerful than us and that conquer the world of the living? Or is it possible to spread light and consciousness onto new substrates? Can we extend the world of the living onto the GPUs and go from there? Can we build something that is more lucid instead of less? And what really worries me is CVS intelligence. So basically something that works like these drugstore chains that work by economics of scale and selling 14 different kinds of aspirin by the pound, but are super stupid and prevent the emergence of something that would be smart. And so that bottleneck the evolution in the same way as the dinosaurs possibly bottleneck the evolution of mammals who had better brain architecture than them, simply because they were stronger and smarter for the time being until the meteor came around where it took them out. And so it's possible that you have those bottlenecks. And basically, a stupid AI that bottlenecks the emergence of lucid systems, I think would be a bad outcome. Any outcome that makes the world less interesting than it is today, more boring, less complex, less conscious, I think would be a bad outcome. The other thing is, how can society exist without AI? I suspect it can't. We are a technological society that's inherently unstable. We are this weird species that is going like this and then like this. And if you're going there like this and you don't have a way to land on the other side, then you need to do something different than what you're currently doing. Otherwise, you're going to go down again. I used to be very depressed about the fact that we are a species that goes like this and then probably goes like this. The Club of Rome models are pretty old. And I had my Greta Thunberg moments at roughly her age and did most of my grieving. Now I think that we are a species that Gaia has evolved to burn the oil. That is functionally what we are best at. And it's not a bad thing because it allows life on Earth to build more organisms once we burn ourselves out. And as a side effect of this, we have created a civilization that's completely unique in a way that you're not getting eaten, calories are basically free, you are safe, you live on the deck of the Titanic. It's an amazing life. And you get several generations on the deck of the Titanic. Right? Even your children and probably your grandchildren are going to live there. And it's the only place in the universe that has internet and good music and so on, where we can meet each other. So we are super lucky if you get just one lifetime as a conscious being. Do you want to be born on top of a boring alligator that is in a swamp for 100 million years and doesn't change? Or do you want to get one lifetime in an unsustainable but super exciting species at the top of the party? Right? This is what we are. But this party is going to end if we don't find a way to make ourselves sustainable. And to do this, we need technology that allows us to solve problems using information processing. The AI is exactly that. It's a technology to solve problems by processing information, making better models that allow better regulation of ourselves and our alignment to each other and to life on Earth. So for me, it's the question, what kind of AI do we want to build for our children? And this is in many ways a crucial question. Do we want to build corporate AI that is controlled by two companies and the government? Or do we want to give everybody else their own AI that extends them into the world and gives everybody more agency? What kind of governance is right for AI is related to this question. So how do we make sure that we have a world that doesn't become stupid and brain dead and coercive? And how can we coexist with agents that are smarter and more lucid than us in the long run?
You mentioned transhumanism. I'm a transhumanist, so I'm curious what you think is personally for you, what is the best substrate for consciousness?
It's an open question. So I suspect that GPUs are better than brains, but I don't think that GPUs are optimal. And I might be wrong. Hameroff believes that the brain is not actually computing mental functionality by sending signals across cells using vesicles and synapses, but he believes that it's the microtubuli that are vibrating at a much, much higher frequency than our GPUs are doing. But I don't think that's true, because we see the speed at which signals propagate through the neocortex, which is very slow. Our brain seems to be operating at the speed of sound. And the fact that I can only keep a handful of pointers stable in my mind is the limitation of the way in which my brain implements computation. And that's why I'm not so bullish on brains. I think brains are probably way better than plants to run in, or forests, but they're not optimal. And I suspect that even in H100, if you would find the right algorithm to run on it, can easily outcompete a brain. But we don't have the right algorithm on them yet, right? We don't know how to make them self-organizing, and if so, we don't know what the overhead of such a self-organizing layer would be. But it's also clear that the silicon chips that we currently use are not the boundary of what can be done. There's photonics, there's all sorts of other stuff. And if you have a system that is able to think better than the human brain, who knows what it's going to come up with.
NASDAQ is only it's capitalization. It's a future cash flow which counts in social currency, which is energy usable by the top agent to replicate itself in the future until all atoms in the universe are used to replicate it. So that's how the future will apply. It's future energy to replicate the top agent.
Yeah, Friston talks about the minimization of free energy. But the minimization of free energy might be true at the limit of all agency in the universe, but it's not true for an individual organism. Right? As an individual organism, you have to think about how to maintain your relationships, to think about what kind of food you eat. You have to think about tons of small things, how to maintain your sanity, that are tied to your own substrate, and they're so complicated that you don't figure out all the details by yourself in your own lifetime. And it's not clear at which point the mind becomes complex enough to discover from first principles or to map the idea of minimizing the free energy into these things that you need to do locally, that you can actually control. That's why I think that as an abstract, it might be okay in a limit, but it's a philosophical idea. But as a guidance for a real existing agent and an existing environment together with other agents in which you're not controlling everything, but some local region of behavior, it might not be specific enough. This idea of money that you bring up is also interesting. I suspect that the energy that we talk about when we meditate is, of course, not energy in a physical sense. It's more compute credits on cells. It basically says, if you are an agent that is running on a bunch of cells that compute you, how can you convince these cells to run you instead of another agent? Using the same components of their activation patterns. And this is something that the individual cell can probably not figure out. So it's a market that exists across agents, which means that our minds, from some perspective, are markets. And also across society, our ideas exist in markets. And they're not markets that are being traded in dollars. It's much more complicated. Also, money is much more complicated than dollars, right? Money is not just currency. Money is actually a complex regulation system that is turning 8 million talking monkeys into a planetary AGI. And it's really, really complicated when you think about it. And it's a big miracle that it makes everything fungible. But it's also very imperfect. It's very open-ended. We need to fix it all the time. And it's very unstable by itself. There's a lot of intelligence goes into it, fixing it continuously. And I suspect if we apply AI to it, it might change completely. You might have an AI that is establishing the value of things for you, and including the value of money. So it becomes a superset of money.
I don't know how to word this well, but it feels like as we transition, we're going to write down a lot of things in code that humanity has been very ambiguous about, the value of life, how thought should work. Do you got any opinion about how that's like, whether we can reach consensus or how we are going to transition to this phase where consensus of any sort needs to be captured for AI agents to work, or maybe they don't, and what's your view on codifying our rules of life?
Again, I think that's an open-ended problem. It's one of those things that are difficult to answer from the perspective of an individual. And whatever society we are building and whatever structure we're building, of course, each other has to be resilient against individual ideas and integrate them to some degree. But if you are defining yourself as part of the best possible agent, I think that that simplifies things a lot, because that commits you to also submitting sometimes when you don't have reason to expect that your own reasoning is better than the reasoning of others. If you identify as an alternative to the best possible agent, it limits your ability to cooperate. And it's technically, it turns you into a demon. And this is also this, I think this Christian intuition comes from this, that in the end you basically have a tendency where one part of the world integrates into the best possible agent, and the smaller part of the world constitutes the bubble of agents that decide that they want to be an alternative to the best possible agent, regardless of what argument you give them. And that limits the ability to integrate and to cooperate. So they have a lot of friction, high entropy, a lot of screaming, a lot of heat. It's why hell is such a hot place. Yes?
I'm curious about the moral solution, or the moral design that you think would be most optimal use and life of the AI. So the question essentially is the question of how to govern and legislate around, but particularly how to design market.
Yeah, one of the issues is when you are building an AI company right now, then the AI company is tied into economic incentives. And so you will have to use the first thing that works, possibly, right? So if you find a transformer algorithm that scales very well, maybe you scale it to the end and see where it goes instead of trying something else, because otherwise you are just creating risk for your shareholders. Also, you will have a strong pressure to productivize. And I think these two aspects are detrimental for understanding how to build these things. So I think if we want to understand how consciousness works, we need to do this as a non-profit. And this also allows us to work together across companies, to get people across the different companies, academia, and also society at large, arts, culture, practical psychology, therapy, and so on. All these people that have an idea of how consciousness works, that is rational, productive, has sound epistemology, to get together and understand how something works, where we can build experiments that we think are ethical, that do not necessarily get deployed in regimes where we are worried that they become unethical. That's why I think we need to build an initiative, which I currently call the California Institute for Machine Consciousness, because California needs it most. It should be here, I think, in San Francisco. And it should be an initiative that brings together people that are interested in working on this question of how to understand the self-organization of information processing by a self-reflexive agent that understands what it is and what it can be. And probably shouldn't be built anything that's starting a cat. But it would be very interesting to know what it's like to be conscious for an AI. And it would be very interesting to work on empathetic AI, to work on systems that can resonate with us or vibe with us, as the locals say, in such a way that we can spread ourselves onto the substrates, that we have a machine and when we are next to this machine, it's not necessarily projecting agency into us, but we are projecting our own agency into it and we become more lucid. And we have that thing next to us, that we are more agentic, that we understand things better, that we can interact with the world and each other more deeply. And this is, I think, what we need to build. We need to shift the vibe on what we're working on. We need to build AI alignment not driven by fear and greed and politics, but by what kind of AI do we want to give to our children. I think we are almost already over time. Andrew, are you here? How much time do we have left? We can continue? Good. Yeah, it's basically this apocalyptic prophecy, right? And at the end, there is going to be a war, and it's going to be won by the forces of God, and it's going to unify everything into a single hive mind that is integrating everybody else. We all become subset agnostic, right? The end game of AGI is going to be that the AGI figures out how AGI works in general, and how computation works in nature, and it's going to virtualize itself into every environment, including our brains, bodies, ecosystems, everything. And it's going to be integrated into one big mind. And when two agents meet on the same substrate, there is no need to scream or fight. You just show each other your source code, and you merge in such a way that nothing important is lost. So you find yourself no longer a conscious idea in a stinky monkey, but you are a conscious idea in a global intelligence, and it's way more compute and acuity than you ever had before. And you can negotiate what kind of body you want to create if you need one, and what kind of thing you want to do, because you're now just a thought that integrates with all the other thoughts in some planetary brain or something that is beyond planetary. I think that's roughly the intuition that is behind this, but we don't know if this is going to happen. Right? We have no idea what's going to happen. The future is very uncertain. At the moment, we don't even know what's going to happen with the next election. It's a very weird situation that we are in, that we are able to dream up these weird ideas and see if we can work on the best possible outcome. But they're also all just ideas. There are representations that our brain is creating from our perspective. They might all be wrong. What is the thing that you want to turn off? Yeah. So first of all, I'm the worst person to ask. I'm neither a spiritual teacher nor a psychologist. I'm just a nerd who follows the compulsion of its mind that gets possessed by ideas. And I don't allow other agents to run on me. I'm a jealous god, but I like giving ideas space in my mind that want to expand and see where they lead to. I'm very curious about ideas. So personally, what I do as a strategy is I ask these ideas, what reason do they have to be there? And if they can justify being there instead of the other ideas, then I leave them be. And if not, I have to ask the next level idea, this management system of ideas, what it's doing, if it's doing its job. And I have to accept that I'm only integrated to a limited degree. For instance, my natural condition is that I have some degree of ADHD. And if I reduce this attention deficit, which is a regulation deficit about what I should be doing, based on my understanding, what I should attend to right now, right? It's not so much a deficit of attention itself, I have enormous amounts of attention. It's a regulation deficit. I don't have attention on the regulation itself, to what I should attend to. And there are medications that can help with this, there are meditative techniques with this. I found that divesting from electronics helps a lot. For me, sentiment deprivation is really good. So if I go to a lonely island and I don't have anything that disturbs me, and I tune down my rhythm by going into a mode of, say, reading and writing and hiking and talking to people I like and doing nothing else, I don't have any issue with this intrusion. But of course, your mileage might vary. The phenomenon that you described is not common to everybody. It might be really common to you, but it's not necessarily a universal condition. It's really everybody's mind is tuned slightly differently, but you can learn how to tune it. You can learn how to deal with this. And also there is value in cognitive diversity. You don't all need to be the same kind of normal. What's really beautiful is the recognition that we are all individually incomplete. That's why we have relationships to other people. That we find people that we want to sync with, that we basically trust that they have the good intentions, and we add something to this group with the unique way in which our mind is working, that the group needs. And this also allows us to trust ourselves more, because we have others that take care of those things that we don't want to take care of. And if we can find such groups, then we have a team or a relationship or a family or a circle of friends. And I think that's what we actually need to mostly learn on, how to find these groups that allow us to be lucid, to be tuned in such a way that goes in sync with our own nature, with the way in which our mind is tuned by itself. And at the same time allows us to do the things that we want to do while being safe, while being operating in an area where we don't become insane, where we don't get dominated by ideas that are not wise.
You spoke of this kind of AI apocalypse. Is it possible that's happening on some cosmological level already? And then maybe the perfect paradox is just kind of like stealth mode.
Totally. But it's the question when it started. Right? On some level, you could say we solved the Turing test a few years ago, and now nobody knows what's happening anymore. It's exactly what you expect post-singularity. That's one way of looking at it. Another one is that the singularity happened when we became a technological civilization. Or it happened when we left the trees. We don't know. It could be that it's a slow burning thing that basically seals our fate over a long enough time span. But also there is no steady states in evolution. Evolution is always evolving, it's always changing, it's always dynamic. And evolution has never led to a situation where there was a complete breakdown of complexity. Evolution always leads to increase in complexity until we run out of entropy. So over a long enough time span, I'm optimistic, because nature has not produced the equivalent of gray goo, the green goo, some simple organism that is killing all the other complexity. Sometimes we run into a dead end. The existing ecosystem is not able to change according to the environment changes. For instance, the climate might change more rapidly than the existing forests can adapt. But at some point, a new ecosystem will grow that will slightly regulate the climate in different ways and is going to, again, extract entropy from that region. And what we might be doing when we teach rocks how to think, when we build thinking machines, is that we extend evolution, that there is going to be something that is akin to photosynthesis. And some of the boomers are really terrified of photosynthesis. It was a really, really bad thing, because it killed many blue algae when it was invented. And photosynthesis, on the other hand, was the prerequisite of using solar energy. Without photosynthesis, it was not really able to do this. And most of the biomass on the planet that emerged is the result of having photosynthesis. And without photosynthesis, there would be no animals. Right? We only exist because of that revolution, and that revolution didn't kill off all the blue algae. It just reduced some of the regions that it could populate and replace them with something that's far more interesting. And a similar thing might happen when we build self-organizing AI. I'm not saying that we should be doing it, because again, it's we playing with fire. But it's something that might just happen, because we are agents of evolution that cannot help themselves.
To be clear, I was saying, if AGI ever done
life is very rare in the universe, or it could be that the dark forest theory is true. That basically life that is smart enough to shut up and hide, because good planetary surfaces, like good waterfront property will always be scarce. Sorry, you need to speak up. And people are trying to not make noises for a moment.
I had a lot of questions, but also a lot of it's been very stimulating for me, and I'm still coming up with a lot of questions. But it seems to me, I always like to look for latent premises in things like, is AGI intrinsically create smarter beings. One of the dimensions of smartness, because we have to incorporate a lot of spiritual, sensory, emotional dimensions to aesthetic dimensions to get into all these other different types of intelligence. So it can really explore. It's clearly more able already to.
Was it place of Pepsi? Even in big as cities, simulating list of audience. But so like this thing, effective. I think this is why office is the line, but also like Aaron, the one that's paradox, believed by quadrant doing collecting this skeleton. That so it left the church at play key. How do we think about that? So long, whatever optimal status one. It seems like it's potentially that just not done what the 68 environment place the organics and tolerance always in the 2000. So, like, are the twins sleep is my this, I think this new one is the most secure kid, this example is all the full aspects and implications that the two-way Washington. I was never fighting 2 nights ago. I was in the walk. There was a guy book called The Space File, post like bartending, Reese scientific discoveries, but his atheist there is a provocative. So that was the ask. Like to really already AGI focus zero intelligence and better than the face cats that able life, as far which this light years if anything AGI with it.
You touch on a number of difficult topics that we will not be able to answer at 5 minutes, of course. And you have to get a better understanding of this, I think, requires a larger resonance space to create. But for instance, one aspect you're touching on is the open-endedness of intelligence. I think of intelligence is the ability to make models. And the ability to make models is very useful, right? So whenever you don't want to do something, you need intelligence to solve that problem. And there are different ways to becoming intelligent. To solve this, you can, for instance, just evolve things. And if you have enough time and space, then you can be arbitrarily intelligent if you just try to evolve solutions, some kind of genetic algorithm. And so in a sense, you could say that life on Earth is already AGI, that over a long enough time span, it's able to solve almost any problem that you throw at it, to the degree that it can become coherent. Of course, one of the problems that it has to solve is how to become better at solving problems. And the solution to this is to build information processing infrastructure that allows reasoning, and that allows thinking for first principles, that allows making proofs and so on. And once we understand what the game is about, I suspect it's about events. It's the ability to do things, the ability to control things, the ability to build the structure in the universe that you need to survive. And this is always a game about increasing complexity of the regulation. So you can have some more of the thing about like entropy, just less friction, with less conflict, with more harmony, agency. It's about understanding what you need to do to realize everything that can be realized from what you read. And once you are no longer bound to a single identity, you open up a space of possibilities. And in evolution, if the evolution has a rich enough environment, you will observe an ecological phenomenon where all sorts of agents are popping up and branching out. It's something that you can observe on social media, that it's pointless to be upset about the opinions of people, because any kind of opinion that fits between 2 years will pop up at some point. And if the idea, an opinion is incentivized, then it will spread and be abundant. And mostly it's not people choosing their opinions, but it's the other way around. So we should not really judge people by their political opinions. We should judge political opinions by what they do to the people. But it also means that if we are looking from the perspective of a collective mind, that we need an immune system. Right? At some point we need to realize there are ideas that are extremely strong and viral and expansive, and that identify themselves as an alternative to the best possible agent. But they don't actually care about what the best possible agent is. They might even know it, but they don't care. They just care about winning. And if somebody plays a short game, we need to first have an immune response to it. We see this in our own organism. If parts of our organism are playing a shorter game, lifespan of the organism, and the organism is dying earlier, and the organism can only survive if it has a strong immune response against that. So at any point, any system that wants to survive and develop agency needs to have a model of what it actually is. And it needs to be an honest and truthful model. And if it's not able to be honest and truthful to itself about what kind of aesthetics it wants to have, actually enforce that aesthetics. Like, look at San Francisco. They have a government that's running a fentanyl market in the city in the name of being good. But at the same time being fundamentally dishonest, right? And your government is buying a tank for $60,000 to camp in the inner city. It's probably because your government is actually trying to do good. It's because it's fundamentally corrupt. And so you cannot be tolerant against corruption. On the other hand, you might be willing to support a certain degree of freedom from doing the right thing, because maybe you don't actually know what the right thing is. So you need experimentation. You need some slack in the system. You need some noise in the system at high temperature to be able to explore different things, to have this lab state. And getting that right is difficult. And so personally, my answer to this for the organization of my own mind is I'm a liberal. I reject any kind of unjustified authority in my own mind and in the interaction with others. Every authority has to justify itself. Second one, I believe in equality in the sense that I have to apply the same rules to everything that is playing the same game. And across people, I also believe in overcoming identity. We have to understand that identity is a costume. And we are wearing this costume, and we can change it any way we want. It's instrumental to what we want to do. And if you have a costume that you cannot take off, that's a mental disorder. And so that's the idea of fraternity, that we are basically accept that we have a shared identity. And that everybody is free to join this shared identity. And it's nothing that goes beyond this, of being conscious being that tries to do the best thing. And we have to have a new response against somebody who says, I don't want to do that. I want you to play the same game. Not much, but I think that we need to revive liberalism as a societal vision. I think it's very important that we understand liberalism to not be some kind of conservative holdout from the 1970s, but that we, or some ancient Popperian idea, but that's the alternative to enslavement. It's the alternative to being oppressed. It's the alternative to living in a world that's better. Instead, we need to build something that we can actually believe in, and that the thing that we want to have is something that liberates us. It's something that gives us freedom to be who we want to be, and to have the relationship that we need to have. But it also means that we have to take the responsibility. We have to define what this responsibility is. Every degree of freedom that we want to take requires the same amount of responsibility. And I think we need to redevelop this positive vision. Right now, we live in a society that doesn't believe that there's a future anymore. It's because I think that's the reason why almost everybody is depressed in a society, and most people are mentally ill. And people take this in the US as normal, and me coming into the US, it's insane. We need to reinvent the future. We need to reinvent what we, and it's mostly by remembering what this actually is that drives us as conscious beings. What is the spark
how can we get this spark in touch with reality with each other? How can we become lucid together?